Welcome to the University of Wyoming, Laramie County Extension, and the Laramie County Master Gardeners Gardening for Success program. And today we're out in the field and we're going to be talking about planting garlic, because you plant garlic in the fall and kind of nurture it a little bit through the winter and then harvest it the next late spring, early summer. So Mike Heath is our instructor on this, and we will learn all sorts of great things about garlic. So Mike.
Hello everybody, I'm Mike Heath with Laramie County Master Gardeners, and like Catherine said, we are going to talk about planting garlic today. And we are out in the field, the wind's blowing like crazy, and of course the camera's shaking. I hope you can get through the shakiness, because like I said, the wind's blowing pretty good out here. First thing I want to talk about is grading your garlic out so you know what to plant. Because as you notice, if you take your bulbs and break the cloves apart, you'll have big bulbs and little bulbs. And I've got a little bit of an example here of the size of garlic bulbs. If you can see these, and you see some of them are small and some of them are pretty good size. The ones that you want to plant for your biggest bulbs are going to be your larger cloves, because larger cloves, of course, give you bigger bulbs. And when you go to buy your garlic, don't go to the grocery store and buy it. Don't go to the grocery store and buy it, because those garlic bulbs you get at the grocery store are specifically grown for resale, and they're usually grown in the South. They won't grow in Wyoming, or if you do, you'll get very tiny bulbs. They're also often very old and not suitable for planting and growing for yourself. So go online, figure out what kind of variety of garlic that you want, because they all have different flavors, different pungencies. Some are extremely hot, almost like a really hot pepper, and some of them are very mild. You'll also have some, like the ones that we're going to plant today, are Dunganskis, and they're a medium heat, but a very nutty flavor, almost like biting into a pecan. So choose your bulbs, choose your variety, and you can also look at the number of cloves on a bulb, because they'll range anywhere from about 5 or 6 cloves up to about 15 cloves. And that'll tell you about how many you can plant from each bulb. So let's head on out to the garden and we'll get on with planting.
Okay, so this is a drip tape, and you've got your emitters. They look like every 6 inches.
Every 6-inch emitters.
Okay, so there's the emitter.
And these are coming off a 1/2-inch polypropylene line.
So the string is just to keep you in line.
Keep me straight, because I can't draw a straight line. Even with a ruler.
Strings are always helpful.
Just a note before we get started. Garlic can be planted either fall or spring. If you plant it in the fall, we'll cover it with mulch here in a few minutes and let it go through the winter, and it'll be ready about mid-July. If you plant in the spring, this will be ready about August. I found it real easy to plant in the fall, and then I don't have to worry about it in the spring when everything else is going on and things are getting so busy and hectic.
Right, that sounds like a good plan.
I found this handy-dandy little tool at gardenersedge.com. That's the only place I've ever seen it. And if you look at the shank here, this thing's handmade.
Nice.
It's not a machine made, and it's supposed to be for weeding. And I found it works best for digging my trench for garlic.
Okay.
So
as
let's
gardeners,
get started.
We always love our tools. Now I noticed one thing here, Mike.
Yeah.
That you've got your garlic soaking in water.
Yes, let's talk about that. No, it's actually not water. It's a fish emulsion solution.
I'm glad you said something, because we're going to put my hand in there.
Well, you can probably tell by all the flies. I use about 2 tablespoons per gallon. Or excuse me, 1 tablespoon per gallon, because I cut it in half, and I soak them for at least 30 minutes, and they can soak for a couple of days as well. So if you don't get finished one day, it's not going to hurt them to stay in the solution.
Okay, so you're not worried about rotting or
no.
Another critter helping themselves to it.
I'll put them inside.
Okay, there you go.
So they're good. Now, one thing you will find, though, the skins on them start to slip off.
Okay.
Because they get soggy and they'll slip. not a big deal. So don't worry about it.
Okay.
It just makes it kind of hard to hold sometimes.
All right.
So let's dig a trench and then we'll scoop some out and get going.
All right.
I did have this trench partially started earlier.
Good thing this isn't smell-o-vision.
It's not too bad. And it's also something you get used to after a while.
Says the gardener.
Well, yeah, I guess. But it's real simple. When you dig the trench, you just place your garlic cloves in, stand them up on end, and make sure that you're putting the root end on the ground and not the top side.
So you want the pointy end up.
Pointy end up, dull end down.
Yep.
And you can see where the roots have been coming out of that bulb, that clove. And that's the part that has to go on the ground. If you flip it the other way, you won't get any growth at all. So you put them in about every 6 inches. I don't use a measure or anything, because you can go 4 to 6 inches, or that's about 4 to 9 inches, no big deal. You don't want to get any smaller than that or any closer. And your row is going to be about 6 inches apart. And once you get everything in the ground, you want to cover it with about 1 inch of dirt, soil. Now this soil has already been amended. As I said earlier, I've tilled the straw back into it, but I also have put compost over it. So this year I ran about 1.5 inches, 2 inches of compost on top of this.
So when you say compost, there's a lot of misconceptions about compost, and we need to make that clear, because what you're talking about is really a non-manure based compost. So there's no manure in this soil whatsoever.
Right. I did have a load of compost that I bought a couple of years ago that turned out to be manure compost, killed the garden, and I'm still trying to recover that.
Yeah.
What the compost is that I make on here is old plant material, straw, things like that. And I'll let it sit for 2 to 3 years rather than just use it. And it breaks down pretty well in the first year and then just cures the next few years. And it's just almost like real fine soil when it comes out.
Okay. Do you use any of the kitchen scraps?
Yeah, but they're so minimal they don't even count.
Okay.
There's just not enough of that. Because the compost piles that we can walk around afterwards and look at some of those, but they're big enough. I turn them with a tractor. These aren't little compost piles.
Okay, we'll look at that later.
So anyway, just cover it with 1 inch of soil, and then we'll go over and we'll come back in with 3 to 4 inches of mulch on top of this. After we take my strings up, of course. And what I use for mulch is straw. Now there's pros and cons with straw. The good thing about it is it's light enough that the garlic's going to come up through the straw. And in the spring, you'll see the green shoots coming up and we're good to go. When you break it apart, you got to take the flakes apart and make it loose. If you leave the flakes whole, the garlic won't come up through it. So you got to break it apart so that it's loose straw. Garlic likes everything loose.
Okay, so you kind of fluff it up a little bit and then put it down.
Okay. And we can go do some over here in a few minutes.
Okay.
I'm ready for that. And so why don't we just go ahead and do that?
Okay, lead on. Okay, so now we're back over here looking at what Mike's talking about as far as a straw bale and how he's going to spread it out over his garden. And again, he did say that you've got to fluff that up and spread it out because the garlic won't come up through a heavy flake or a full flake. So we're back with Mike, and he's going to show us what he's talking about here. So Mike, go ahead.
Okay, if you'll notice, when you pull the straw bale apart, it comes out what's called flakes. You just compact straw that you push together in front of the bale. what you have to do is just pull straw apart, rough it up some, and on a fresh bale, it comes apart real easy. If your bale is 2 or 3 years old or has been kept outside, it gets a lot more difficult to pull apart.
So it kind of compacts together.
Yes, for me. So for me, it wasn't very hard. I just told him what I needed before the wheat harvest, and he baled it for me.
So this is wheat straw. Do you have problems with wheat voluntarily coming up?
Absolutely. That's one of the drawbacks of straw that we started to talk about a few minutes ago. But it's not a real big deal. Wheat has a very shallow root system, and it pulls up real easy. And once it's up, it's not like grasses or anything to come back. When wheat's up, and it's gone. So you go through and feed it out once, and you're done with it.
So it's just a fast annual that you really don't have to worry about.
Right. Just catch it early. The one thing I caution you about, though, is when wheat's first coming up and garlic's first coming up, they look the same. So you got to know where your garlic's planted so that you're not pulling the garlic up instead of the wheat.
Okay. Well, that's good advice to have.
And once we finish getting all of our straw down, we'll just move just a little bit over to the right and look at this row here. And remember, we are in Wyoming. The wind does blow. So we got to put something over the top of that straw, hold it down through the winter. And I just use construction fencing. It's cheap. It lasts a long time. The fence you see there is probably 10 years old. It's still going. And I use this stuff just about every year.
So do you use anything to help hold the construction fencing down?
I use stakes.
Okay.
And I make my own stakes. I just use number 9 wire and bend them over. And that way I can get the length and the size of the crook on the end that I want.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. So there's a row here where you've started to add mulch, and then you've put your construction fencing down. And it doesn't look like you've finished unrolling your construction fencing.
Well, actually, this roll is not going to be quite long enough, so I'm going to have to add another roll to it.
So then do you just cut that roll to fit, or do you just?
I have enough rolls that I'll just leave it rolled up rather than cut it. And I'll just pin that end down so that it doesn't move.
Okay. And so these are the pins you're talking about?
That's one of the styles, yes.
Okay. And
I
then
have different kind of stakes for different purposes.
okay, so, and in this one that we're looking at now, this one is staked down. I can see
It's staked
some of
down.
them.
That row's completely finished, or at least up to that point, and it's ready to go for the winter.
Yep, so you can see where that stake has been put down there. Do you have any trouble with the wind lifting it in the middle?
Not when I stake it.
Okay.
Now, once you get everything down, and there again, if you're using just doing a small home garden, it's not a big deal. But once I get everything down, I'll go through and I'll water it all real good. And that'll get the roots started this fall. If it starts to come up, as long as it doesn't get too big, that's okay, because it'll die off. It'll start back up again in the spring. You will have to fertilize throughout the year, because garlic just loves fertilizer, loves nutrients, and it'll just tear them out of the soil. So you do have to go through and fertilize. And when I go through and fertilize this first time, water the first time, I'll take all of the fish emulsion mix that I've been soaking everything in, and I'll run that through the fertilizer injector, and I'll put it right back into the soil along with the garlic.
Okay, so not everybody has a fertilizer injector system for their home garden. How else would you suggest fertilizing garlic?
I'd actually suggest buying a system. They're fairly cheap. Dripworks.com has them already made up. I made my own, actually following their design. But it's a real simple system to make, cheap to purchase, And that's the easiest way to do it. Otherwise, if you just got a small bed, 10, 20 plants, you can use a watering can. Mix your fertilizer in your watering can and just sprinkle it on.
Okay, so you recommend a liquid fertilizer versus a granular. Okay.
I use liquid. I've never used a granular in the garden at all.
Okay.
I don't know if there's a big difference. I've just always used the liquid.
Okay, and you like the fish emulsion, which is, do you remember what the numbers are on that?
Well, the fish emulsion is specifically to get it started.
Okay.
And then I'll go with a higher nitrogen fertilizer when I start next spring.
Okay.
The fish emulsion is, I know it's 5% nitrogen, and I think it's a 1% potassium and 1% phosphorus, something along that line.
Yep.
And between the timed fertilization or timed irrigation and the mulch on garlic, critical, because that mulch will hold that moisture in and also reduces your irrigation.
That's correct. So you can water less. And for people who live in town and have to pay a water bill, that starts to become very important on being very water frugal, but yet having a successful garden.
Well, I go further than that, because even people that live outside of town and are on wells, it's expensive to have to pull a well. And the more you're turning your water on and off, the more times you're cycling those switches, and the sooner you have to pull your well.
Yep. Yep. And water out in the county is not free.
No.
It's you still have to pump it up. There's an electrical bill to it, and pumps, in my experience, only go out at Christmas time in a blizzard.
Ours is going out twice this last week. Actually, it was switches, but we're living on borrowed time with the pump. We've got 20 years on it. It's got a 7-year life expectancy, and it's going to be about a $2,500 bill when it goes out.
Yep. So being water savvy and gardening savvy and irrigation savvy is really important no matter where you live, in town or
That's right.
out in the county.
And you don't want to water so much that you're running off your garden either.
Yep.
Which is why it's precision irrigation with the drip tape.
Yep.
Because you're running it off the garden, what good's it doing?
You're watering weeds.
Exactly.
And
don't want weeds.
Don't want weeds. We don't want weeds. So Mike, anything else you can impart on growing garlic?
Well, in this session, growing it is probably about as far as we want to go, and we'll come back in the spring and we'll harvest and dry it out and start processing.
All right. Well, Mike, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. And everybody who's watching, thank you for joining in. And this is the University of Wyoming, Laramie County Extension, and the Laramie County Master Gardeners. So thank you.